It was 6 in the morning when I heard the knocking on the door. These weren't ordinary knocks, like the ones the mail carrier makes or a forgetful neighbor's tap. These were firm, persistent, almost urgent strikes, the kind that jolts you awake, your heart pounding in your chest, a slow, sinking feeling that something serious is happening. I sat up in bed, feeling puzzled as I tried to understand what was going on. Outside, it was still dark. The faint light of dawn was just beginning to seep through the curtains in my bedroom. Who could be at the door this early hour? I thought about ignoring it, about lying back down and pretending I hadn't heard a thing, but the knocking kept going, growing louder and more desperate. I got out of bed, grabbed the robe I always keep hanging on a hook beside the bed, and stepped barefoot into the chilly hallway. With each step toward the door, my nerves tightened a little more. Something in the air felt strange and heavy, as if the morning itself sensed that this day would be different from all the others. I reached the front door and looked through the peephole. It was Arthur, my lifelong neighbor, the man who lives 3 houses down, the same man who helped me fix the yard after Elijah passed away 5 years ago. But this wasn't the calm, kind Arthur I knew. His face looked pale and troubled. His eyes were wide open, filled with something I recognized immediately: fear, genuine, deep fear, the kind you can't pretend. I opened the door carefully, just enough to see him better. He stepped forward, almost tripping over his own words. "Ara, listen to me," he said. "Don't leave the house today. Please trust me. Do not go out for any reason." His voice was trembling. Arthur never trembled. He was a man in his late 60s, a military veteran, a person who must have seen things in his life that I could never imagine. And there he was, pleading with me to listen to him with such urgency that it made my blood run cold. "What is it, Arthur? What are you trying to say? What's wrong?" He looked behind him at the empty street, as if expecting to see someone or something. Then he turned back to me, and for a moment I thought he was going to tell me everything, but he didn't. Instead, he shook his head with an expression of pain I had never seen before. "I can't quite explain it now. Just stay inside. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone, not even if they claim to be officials. Do you understand?" Nobody. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Officials? What was he talking about? Why couldn't he just tell me what was going on? "Arthur, you're frightening me. Please tell me." "You'll understand this afternoon. I promise you'll see. But right now, I need you to trust me. Please, Ara, I'm begging you." Before I could reply or insist on a full explanation, he was already stepping back, slowly retreating down the driveway. I watched him slip away into the shadows of the morning, walking hurriedly and glancing nervously from side to side as if he were being chased. I closed the door with unsteady hands and stood there silently in my own home, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. What was that all about? I headed to the kitchen. I needed a glass of water. I needed to think clearly. I turned on the light, and the bright glare made me blink. Everything in my house appeared normal. The table where I have my breakfast, the cups hanging in their usual place, the wall clock Elijah gave me on our 30th anniversary. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. I poured water with trembling hands and settled into a chair. Why was Arthur so frightened? And why couldn't he tell me what was wrong? He and I shared a good relationship. After Elijah died, Arthur was one of the few people who truly cared about me. He used to help me with heavy chores around the house and would invite me over for coffee from time to time. He was always there whenever I needed assistance. But this situation was different. It wasn't a simple courtesy visit or a favor among neighbors. It was a warning, urgent, desperate, and frightening. I glanced at the clock. It was 6:15 a.m. Outside, the sky was slowly brightening, glowing with soft shades of orange and pink. On a normal day, I would be preparing to go out. Tuesdays were reserved for my visit to the Cedar Grove Community Center, where I volunteered in the children's reading program. I started doing this after I was widowed, as a way to keep busy, to feel that I was still useful, and to avoid being alone in this house, filled with memories. But today, Arthur had told me not to leave and to stay inside. Why? What could be so dangerous outside that he felt compelled to come to my house at 6 in the morning just to warn me? I tried to make sense of it. Maybe he had heard something on the news. There might have been a security alert in the neighborhood, but then why didn't he tell me directly? Why the secrecy? And why did he instruct me not to open the door, even if they appeared to be officials? That part disturbed me more than anything else. Officials of what? The police? The government? What kind of situation calls for distrusting authorities? I got up and stepped to the living room window. I gently drew back a corner of the curtain and looked outside. The street was quiet and empty. The trees moved softly in the morning breeze. Everything seemed perfectly normal, perhaps almost too normal. Then I saw it. A car parked at the far end of the street, right at the corner. It was a gray sedan with tinted windows. It didn't look like it belonged to anyone in the neighborhood. I was certain of that. I knew my neighbor's cars well. This one was new, and the way it was parked, slightly angled as if the driver wanted a clear view of the entire street, made my nerves tighten. Was that car there earlier? I can't recall, but I usually don't pay that much attention to such details unless something feels off. I drew the curtain closed and stepped back from the window, a sense of unease growing inside me. This was absurd. I was a retired widow, 68 years old, leading a simple and predictable life. Who would want to harm me? Why would anyone be watching my house? Yet the look on Arthur's face lingered in my mind. The fear in his eyes was genuine, and Arthur wasn't the kind of man who was easily frightened. I returned to the kitchen and decided to make myself a cup of coffee. I needed the caffeine to stay alert, to think clearly. While the water boiled, I reached for my phone. Perhaps I should call someone, but whom? My children live far away. Shayla was in another state, busy with her law career. Jackson was overseas, chasing his dream of becoming a photographer. We spoke last Sunday, our usual weekly call. Everything seemed normal, everything felt fine. I couldn't call them now and tell them I was afraid because my neighbor had warned me not to leave the house. That would set off alarm bells. They would want me to move in with someone to leave this house, this life, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. The coffee was ready, so I sank back into my chair and stared at the steaming cup. What was I supposed to do? Sit here all day, waiting for what exactly to happen? Arthur had said I would understand by the afternoon. What was going to happen in the afternoon? I took a small sip of coffee, but it barely touched my tongue. The pain pulled me back to the present. I needed to stay calm. Maybe I was overreacting. Perhaps Arthur had just had a bad dream or was going through something personal and didn't want to trouble me with the details. The phone rang. I jumped so suddenly that I nearly spilled my coffee. My heart pounded faster once more. I looked at the caller ID. An unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the answer button. What if it was part of what Arthur had warned me about? But it could also have been a normal call, a survey, or a salesperson. I answered, "Hello." Silence. I could hear someone on the other end, soft breathing, but no one spoke. "Hello? Who is this?" More silence, then a click. They hung up. I slowly lowered the phone, looking at it as if it were a strange, dangerous object. A silent call. At 6:30 in the morning, right after Arthur's warning, it didn't feel like a coincidence. It couldn't be. I got up again, this time with more urgency, and checked all the doors in the house. The front door was locked. The back door leading to the yard was also locked. All the windows were closed. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, but I also felt a little safer. I went back to the living room and sat on the sofa, hugging a cushion to my chest. Outside, the day slowly brightened. The world was waking up as it always did, but I was trapped inside, feeling scared and confused, unsure of what was happening. The hardest part was the waiting. Arthur had said I would understand by the afternoon. That meant hours, hours of being alone with my thoughts, imagining the worst possible scenarios. I looked at the clock again, 6:45. The day was just starting, but already it felt like it had been forever. The hours moved by so slowly, almost painfully. I sat on the sofa, glancing at the clock every 5 minutes, feeling time drag on, as if the day itself was trying to break my mind. I tried to keep busy. I turned on the TV, but I couldn't focus on it. The news showed the weather, politics, sports, nothing that could explain why my neighbor had looked so scared when she came to my door. I shut off the TV, and once again silence filled the house. That quiet was familiar. You see, it had been my constant companion for the past 5 years. Since Elijah died, the quiet had become familiar, almost comforting. But today felt different. Today, the silence didn't bring comfort. Instead, it felt heavy and oppressive. I got up and moved around the house, checking the windows once more, making sure everything was shut tight. It seemed silly, like an old woman overly anxious about imagined dangers. Still, I couldn't stop myself. Every little noise made me jump. The wind pressing against the windows, the old wood of the house creaking, the distant sound of a car passing by. I reached the room that had been Elijah's and mine for 35 years of marriage. Now it was only mine. The bed was neatly made, the curtains pulled halfway closed, and his belongings still on the nightstand. I never had the strength to move them. His watch, his reading glasses, the book he hadn't finished. Sometimes I entered just to feel him nearby, to remember what it was like to have someone in this house, what it felt like not to be alone. The children had suggested many times that I sell the house and move into something smaller and easier to manage. It's too big for you alone, Mom, Shayla would say every time we talked. And she was right. This 3 bedroom house, with its large yard and long hallways, felt overwhelming for someone my age. But it was my house. It was the place where I had built my life, where I had raised my children, loved, and experienced loss. I wasn't ready to part with it just yet. I returned to the living room and looked out the window once more. The gray car was still parked there. It hadn't moved in 2 hours. This could no longer be just a coincidence. Someone must have been watching the street, or perhaps watching me. A shiver ran through me. Why would anyone be interested in watching me? I was nobody important, just a retired widow living off my pension and Elijah's savings. We had a simple life. We never had a lot of money. Elijah worked his entire career as an accountant at a mid-sized firm. He completed his work and returned home. We shared dinner together and watched television. A simple, predictable life, without secrets or surprises, or so I believed. I stepped away from the window and went into the kitchen. I needed to eat something, even though I wasn't truly hungry. I made a sandwich but hardly took a bite. The food felt like a lump blocking my throat. My stomach was clenched tight with worry. The phone rang once more. This time I nearly dropped it. I reached out with trembling hands and looked at the screen. It was an unknown number again, different from the morning but equally anonymous. I hesitated. Should I answer? What if it was the same person as before? I finally answered, "Hello." Silence returned, but this time I could hear something else. Background noise, as if the caller was in a busy public place. Distant voices, the sound of traffic. Who could this be? Why are you calling me? Nothing but that soft, almost unnoticeable breathing. Then the line went dead with a click. I placed the phone on the table and sat down, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. I rarely cried easily, having learned to be strong after Elijah's death. I had to hold it together. But right now, everything was becoming too much. I was overwhelmed by a strange sense of confusion, caught in a situation I couldn't understand. Why were they doing this to me? What were they really after? I glanced at the clock. It was 10 in the morning. 4 more hours until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 4 long, endless hours. I got up and started pacing around the house again. Unable to remain still, I passed by the hallway filled with photographs of family. Shayla and Jackson as young children, beaming in their school uniforms. Our wedding picture, me in my white dress, Elijah looking so youthful and handsome. Vacation shots from the beach, birthday celebrations, graduations, an entire life frozen in time, framed and hanging on the wall. I stopped in front of a photo of Elijah, taken just a few months before he died. He was in the garden with his gardening tools, smiling at the camera. He appeared happy and healthy. No one could have guessed that 3 months later he would suffer a severe heart attack in his sleep. The doctor said it happened quickly and that he didn't suffer. That was meant to comfort me, but it never truly did. I missed him so deeply. I missed his voice, his laugh, and the way he would hug me at night before bed. I missed having someone to share my days with, someone who made me feel less alone in this world. "What's going on, Elijah?" I whispered to the photograph. "Why am I so afraid?" Of course, there was no response, only the quiet of the house and the steady ticking of the wall clock. I continued walking and reached the den Elijah used for working from home, where he kept papers from the office. After his passing, I hadn't touched much of this room. The children helped me pack some things, but most of it remained untouched. His files, his folders, his desk, always kept in the careful, tidy way he preferred. I stepped in and sat down in his chair, feeling the old leather creak softly under me. I ran my fingers across the surface of the desk, gathering a little of the dust that had settled over the years. Elijah spent hours here, working through numbers, doing calculations, and handling things I never truly understood. He was the one who focused on the numbers. I was the homemaker, the mother, ensuring everything ran smoothly while he earned the income. That's how our marriage functioned, and it had never caused me any trouble. We were a team, each playing our part. But now I questioned whether I really knew my husband. Were there secrets in his life that I was unaware of? Things he might have hidden to protect me? I shook my head quickly. I was being silly. Elijah was a good, honest, straightforward man. There were no secrets, no hidden mysteries. It was just fear trying to take hold, making me doubt everything. I got up from my chair and was about to leave the den when I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps outside in the yard. I froze, my heart pounding loudly in my chest. The footsteps were slow and purposeful. Someone was walking along the side of my house. Carefully, I moved closer to the den window, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The curtains were partly drawn. I peeked out just enough to see outside. There was a man in my yard, tall and dressed in dark clothing, walking slowly along the side path. He was unfamiliar to me. His hands were in his pockets, and he was glancing at the house, as if he was looking for something. Panic rushed over me. I quickly stepped back from the window, stumbling over my own feet. Who was he? What was he doing on my property? I knew I should call the police, but Arthur had warned me not to open the door for anyone, not even officials. Did that mean I shouldn't trust the police either? I looked out again, more carefully this time. The man was still there, now facing the windows. For a brief, terrifying moment, I thought he had seen me, but he kept walking around the house, then disappeared toward the backyard. I hurried to the kitchen, which had a view of the back patio. I arrived just in time to see him trying to open the back door. My door. He was trying to get inside. I fought back a scream. Fortunately, the door was locked, but he kept pushing gently, testing if it would open. I stepped back from the window, covering my mouth with my hands, trying to steady my breathing. This couldn't be real. It felt like an eternity before the footsteps moved away. I looked again. The man had vanished, leaving the way he came. I sank into a kitchen chair, trembling all over. Someone had tried to break into my house. Someone was watching me, following my movements, testing my doors. Arthur was right. Something terrible was happening. I looked at the clock through tears, feeling overwhelmed. It was 11:30 in the morning, and I still had 2.5 hours to go. How much more could I take? My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and quickly typed a message to Arthur. Someone was in my yard trying to open my door. I was frightened. What's going on? I sent the message and sat there, staring at the screen with desperation. Minutes went by. 1, 2, 10. No response. Please, Arthur, answer me. But there was nothing. The silence in my house was now deafening. Every shadow seemed to shift, and every sound felt like a threat. I felt like a trapped animal, waiting for the moment the predator would strike. The worst part was, I didn't even know who the predator was or why they had targeted me. At exactly noon, the phone rang, as if someone had been waiting for that precise moment. This time, it wasn't an unknown number. The screen simply displayed police department. My heart immediately jumped. With shaky fingers, I reached out to answer the phone. Hello, Mrs. Aurora Vance, came a firm official voice. Serious. Yes, this is me. Mrs. Vance, this is Detective Carter from the police department. I need you to stay calm and listen carefully to what I'm about to say. The tone in his voice made my stomach tighten. Something terrible had happened. Something very serious. What? What's going on? Ma'am, where are you right now? The question caught me off guard. Why did he need to know my location? I'm at my house. Why? What's wrong? There was a pause on the other end. I could hear voices in the background, as if the detective was busy with something important. Mrs. Vance, I need you to confirm something for me. Were you at the Cedar Grove Community Center this morning? I froze. The Cedar Grove Community Center was the place I always went every Tuesday at 9 a.m., and I would have been there today if Arthur hadn't advised me to stay home. I didn't respond, feeling my voice shake. No, I've been here at my house all morning. Why? What's happened? I paused again, this time for a longer moment. When the detective spoke once more, his tone changed. More careful, more worried. Ma'am, this morning at 9:20, there was an incident at the community center. A serious matter, and we have several witnesses who confirm they saw you there. I felt as if the ground was giving way beneath me. What? No, that's impossible. I wasn't there. I'm telling you, I've been at my house all morning, I insisted. I understand, ma'am, but you need to realize the seriousness of what's happening. There are witnesses who identified you, and even security camera footage from the center confirms it. I couldn't believe it. That can't be true. There must be some mistake. I did not leave my house. Vance, is there anyone who can confirm that you were at home this morning? Any family member, any neighbor, any... I thought of Arthur, but he had specifically warned me not to open the door to anyone. That included the police. Besides, he hadn't answered my message. I had no proof of where I had been. I was alone, but I swear I didn't leave. What incident? What happened? The detective sighed on the other end of the line. I'd rather not share details over the phone, ma'am. I need you to come down to the station so we can clear this up. Go to the station? Am I being accused of something? I'm not suggesting that, ma'am. We just need you to come in and provide your statement to help us understand what happened. This is very serious. My mind was a jumble of conflicting thoughts. Arthur had told me not to leave, not to open the door, even for officials. But now the police were asking me to go to the station. What was I supposed to do? I needed some time to understand the situation. Could I come later? Mrs. Vance, I really must ask you to come now. If you're not at the center, as you say, then we have a much bigger problem. Someone is using your identity. The words hit me hard like stones. Someone is pretending to be me. What did that mean? It implied that I was being impersonated. Why? I couldn't grasp any of this. How could someone do such a thing? That's why we need you to come in, ma'am, to help sort this out. I can send a patrol car to pick you up if it makes things easier. No. The words slipped out more loudly than I intended. No, let me think. I need a moment. Mrs. Vance, if you don't come voluntarily, I'll have to. I hung up. I knew it was a foolish move. I probably only made things worse, but panic took over me. I dropped the phone onto the sofa and covered my face with my hands. What was happening? How could there be witnesses who saw me somewhere I hadn't been? And what event had taken place? The detective mentioned it was something serious. How serious? The phone rang again immediately, again from the police department. I didn't answer. It kept ringing 2, 3 times, then finally stopped. I stood up and began pacing across the living room, trying to think, trying to make sense of everything. Someone had impersonated me. Someone who knew exactly where I went on Tuesday mornings. Someone who was familiar with my routine. And now something had happened. Something serious enough that the police were calling me and blaming me for it. I rushed to the window and looked outside. The gray car was no longer in its usual spot. Instead, a police cruiser was parked at the end of the street. 2 officers sat inside looking toward my house. Fear quickly turned into pure terror. I stepped back from the window, my heart pounding so loudly I felt as if I might faint. This was real. Everything was happening for real. I wasn't imagining things, and I wasn't overreacting. Something terrible was unfolding, and I was right in the middle of it all. I grabbed my phone once more and messaged Arthur again, this time with a sense of desperate urgency. The phone rang. It was the police. They said they saw me at the community center and that something serious had taken place. There's a patrol car parked outside my house. Arthur, please, I need your help. I need you to explain what is really going on. I sent the message and stood there, tears falling down my face. This time, I got a reply, almost instantly. Don't open the door. No matter what they say, I am coming. Give me 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I had to hold out for just 20 more minutes. I looked out the window again. The officers remained inside the cruiser, But now one of them was speaking into the radio, probably informing someone that I was at home, that I hadn't left, and that I wasn't answering their calls. How long would it be before they decided to come inside and find me? Did they have a warrant for my arrest? Could they enter my house without my permission? I didn't know much about the law. I had never had any problems with the police in my life. I had been a responsible citizen for 68 years, and now I was hiding in my own home, frightened of the very officers who were supposed to protect me. The phone rang again. This time the number was unfamiliar, but different from the previous ones. I hesitated before answering, but something inside me made me want to know more. I picked up and said, "Hello, Mrs. Vance." This time the voice was feminine, young, and a bit nervous. "Who is this?" I asked. The woman replied, "My name is Belle. I work at the Cedar Grove Community Center. Ma'am, I need to talk to you. It's about what happened this morning." My breathing grew faster. What happened? No one is willing to tell me exactly what took place. It's all so complicated. The woman who was here this morning, the one we all believed was you, she did something terrible. She stole more than $3,000 from the donation box, money we had raised for the scholarship program. Not only that, she also took files from the administrative office, including personal documents of several volunteers and participants in the program. I sank onto the sofa, feeling my legs go weak, but I didn't do any of it. I didn't do that. Why would they accuse me of such things? "I know," Belle said anxiously, her voice sounding truly confused. "That's why I'm calling you, because something just doesn't add up. That woman looked very much like you, Mrs. Vance, almost identical. But when I got a closer look, something was off. Her eyes, the way she moved, the way she spoke. It was you, but at the same time, it wasn't. Do you understand what I mean? I'm so confused. How is it possible that someone looks so much like me? And why? To steal $3,000? That's what doesn't add up," Belle continued. $3,000 is money, yes, but someone who took the effort to pretend to be you, to learn your daily routine, your schedule, why would they risk it for such a small amount? The files she took were specific records, almost as if she knew exactly what she was after. "What kind of files? I can't go into detail, ma'am. But they were sensitive documents containing personal information. The director is furious and the police are now investigating. I just felt I should call you because when I saw that woman this morning, something inside told me that something was wrong. And then now that I realize it wasn't really you, it all makes much more sense. Did you tell the police about this?" "Yes, I did, but they are mainly focused on finding you. They have your fingerprints on the box and witnesses have identified you. For them, it's an open and shut case." "My fingerprints? How could they have my fingerprints if I wasn't there?" On the other end of the line, there was an awkward silence. "I don't know, ma'am, but they have them," Detective Carter told me. I ended the call feeling as if I might vomit. My fingerprints? How was that even possible? How could someone have my fingerprints? Then it came back to me. 2 months ago, I went to the bank to update some documents. They asked for my digital fingerprints to get a new debit card, which is a common step now. They mentioned it was for extra security. Maybe someone had accessed that information and used it. I glanced at the clock. 10 minutes had passed since Arthur's message, just 10 more minutes. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps on the porch, tapping on the door. But these weren't the hesitant knocks from this morning. They were sure and commanding. "Mrs. Vance, Police Department. We need you to open the door." I was frozen in the middle of the living room, staring at the door as if it were a living creature ready to swallow me. The knocking grew louder and more urgent each time. "Mrs. Vance, we know you're in there. Please open the door. We just want to talk to you." It was Detective Carter's voice, the same one I had heard on the phone only moments earlier. But hearing it so close on the other side of the door filled me with a fear I couldn't quite explain. Arthur had warned me not to open up, not to trust anyone, not even officials. But how could I not open the door to the police? Wouldn't refusing only make things worse? "Ma'am, if you don't open voluntarily, we'll have to consider other options. We really don't want it to come to that. Other options." What did that mean? Breaking down the door, a warrant. My mind tried to grasp all the possibilities while my feet stayed firmly planted on the floor. Slowly, I moved closer to the door without making a sound and looked through the peephole. Two men were standing in dark suits. One of them, the man who had been speaking, was about 50 years old, with gray hair and a serious look. The other was younger, standing a little behind him, staring around the porch as if expecting someone else to arrive. "We just want to clarify the community center situation," the detective said. "If you truly weren't there, as you say, then we need your help to find the person who was. It's as simple as that." It sounds reasonable and logical, just what you'd expect a real detective to say. But something in his tone, in the way he looked at me through the peephole, told me this wasn't that straightforward. "I need to talk to my lawyer first," I finally said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. The two men looked at each other. "Ma'am, you're not being accused of anything yet. We only need your statement. You don't have to have a lawyer for a simple conversation." Yet that word kept echoing in my mind. I wasn't being accused yet, but I knew I soon would be if I didn't cooperate. Still, I preferred to wait a little longer. The detective let out a sigh, and for a moment I thought they might leave. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something. A photograph. "Can you at least look at this, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, holding it up close to the peephole. It was a grainy black and white security camera image, but still clear enough. It showed a woman entering the community center, a woman who looked exactly like me. My heart skipped a beat. It was like looking into a mirror. She had the same height, the same hairstyle, and the same way of walking. She even wore similar clothes, dark slacks and a light blouse, with a cardigan over it, just like I might wear. "That's you, Mrs. Vance," the detective said softly. I was too stunned to answer. Who was that woman? How was it possible that she looked so much like me? She had my face, my build, and my style of dress. The staff at the center recognized her immediately. They even called her by name, and she responded, heat-pressed. "Are you telling me you have a twin no one knows about?" "I don't have any siblings," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if they heard me. The detective put the photograph away, and his face hardened. "Mrs. Vance, this won't just go away. The longer you refuse to cooperate, the worse this looks for you. I suggest you think carefully about your decision. I already told you I wasn't there. I don't know who that woman is, but it isn't me. Then help us prove it. Come with us. Give your statement. Let us take your fingerprints for comparison." "You already have my fingerprints," I interrupted. "You said you found them at the scene." Another look was exchanged between the two men. The younger one stepped closer and whispered something into the detective's ear. Carter nodded slowly. "That's correct. We have them. Which makes your insistence that you weren't there even harder to believe. Do you understand the situation you are putting yourself into?" Yes, I understood. I clearly saw that someone had organized this carefully, someone who knew where I went, how I dressed, and how I spoke, someone who had somehow obtained my fingerprints. This was no random theft, it was a planned operation. But why? Why me? "I will give you 5 minutes to open this door, Mrs. Vance," the detective said. His voice now sounded firm and warning. 5 minutes. After that, we will have to take more serious steps." They moved back from the porch and headed toward the police car still parked on the street. I watched as they spoke to each other, one of them making a call on his radio. I stepped away from the door, my legs shaking. Where was Arthur? 15 minutes had already gone by. I needed him to arrive and tell me what the hell was happening. I went back to the living room window and looked outside. The two men were still near the cruiser, waiting. The younger one kept glancing at his watch. Detective Carter was on the phone, using his hands to gesture as if he were arguing with someone. Soon I noticed another car coming down the street, a black sedan, newer than the other vehicles in the neighborhood. It pulled up behind the police cruiser, and a woman stepped out. She was dressed in a formal suit and wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She approached Detective Carter, and they began talking. I couldn't catch what they were saying, but it looked like a serious, tense conversation. The woman pointed toward my house. The detective shook his head. She was insistent. Who was she? Another detective? A prosecutor? My phone vibrated, an incoming message from Arthur. He was 2 blocks away. "Don't open the door," it read. "Whatever happens, do not open the door." It was almost here. I just had to hold on a little longer. But then the woman in the suit started walking toward my house. Not toward the front door, but toward the side. following the same path the man in dark clothing had taken earlier in the morning. She vanished from my view. I hurried to the kitchen to see what she was doing. I saw her walking along the side yard, gazing at the window and inspecting the house. She reached the back door and, to my horror, pulled something out of her purse, a small metallic tool. She was trying to force the lock. Panic took over completely. I grabbed the first thing I saw, a kitchen knife, from the drawer, and stood there trembling, unsure of what to do. The woman kept working on the lock. I could hear the faint clicking of the metal tools. It was only a matter of moments before she might open it. Then I heard a car engine speeding up. Through the front window, I saw Arthur's car skidding to a stop right in front of my house. He quickly jumped out and ran toward Detective Carter, shouting something I couldn't hear. The two men faced each other. Arthur flailed wildly, pointing toward my house and the officers. The detective tried to calm him, but Arthur kept going. At that moment, I heard the final click as the back lock was released. The door opened slowly, and the woman in the suit stepped into my kitchen, removing her sunglasses. When I saw her face clearly, I felt the wall come to a halt. She had my face. She didn't just look like me, she was me. Every wrinkle, every mark, every detail was identical. She smiled, and it was the most frightening smile I had ever seen on my own face. "Hello, Ara," she said in my own voice. "I think you and I need to have a very serious conversation." I backed up until I hit the wall, the knife trembling in my hand. The woman calmly closed the door behind her, never taking her eyes off me. It was like standing in front of a living mirror, but that mirror moved by its own will, breathed and smiled with a coldness I had never seen in my reflection. "Don't scream," she said softly, raising her hands in a gesture meant to be peaceful, but offering no real comfort. "If you scream, the people outside will come in, and trust me, you do not want that. Who are you?" My voice was a faint, raspy whisper. "That's a complicated question," she replied, slowly walking toward the kitchen table and sitting down as if she belonged there. "Let's just say I am someone who knows your life very well. Every detail, every habit, every small secret. What do you want from me?" She tilted her head, examining me with eyes that mirrored mine, but looked entirely different. There was something sharp, almost calculating in them, something cold and ruthless. "It's not what I want, it's what others want. I am simply the messenger, the enforcer, if you prefer to call it that. I don't understand anything you're saying. I know. And that is exactly why we are in this situation. Your ignorance, Alara, your blessed and convenient ignorance about who your husband truly was. When Elijah's name was mentioned, something inside me snapped. For a moment, fury replaced fear. Don't you dare talk about him. You don't know anything about my husband." She laughed, and the sound was unsettling coming from my own face. "That I don't know anything. Oh, Ilara, I know more about Elijah than you did in 35 years of marriage. I know about the hidden accounts, the encrypted files, and the secret meetings. I know about what he discovered and what he tried to do with that information." "You're lying. Elijah was an accountant. He worked with numbers, with companies, and with corrupt organizations," she interrupted. "With dishonest politicians, with very powerful people who moved money in highly illegal ways. And your dear Elijah, the honest, hard-working accountant, decided he had to do the right thing. He decided to gather evidence, document everything, and prepare to reveal these people." I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, still holding the knife. This couldn't be real. Elijah had never mentioned any of this to me. Why would he have done that? Why would he risk everything? "Because he was a noble idiot," she said with disdain. "Because he believed in justice and doing what is right, even if it put his family in danger. And now look at him. 5 years gone, and you're here paying for his choices." "His death was a heart attack." The doctor confirmed it. She looked at me with what seemed like pity. "Are you really that naive?" "Men of 58 in perfect health rarely suffer a sudden massive heart attack, especially when they are about to hand over incriminating evidence to the authorities." The words hit me like punches. It couldn't be true. Elijah being murdered and I never knowing. It couldn't be that all this time. Why now, I asked, tears beginning to flow down my face. Why are they coming after me after 5 years? Because we discovered something. A trail Elijah left behind, a clue suggesting he didn't take all the evidence to the grave, that he kept a backup copy. And we believe you know where it is. I swear I don't know anything. I have no idea about any evidence. That's what you said 6 months ago when we stopped you at the bank. Remember, we asked for your digital fingerprints for the new security card. A completely routine procedure. That memory flooded back to me with shocking clarity. The bank employee, firm yet kind, the digital scanner, the way she reassured me it was only for my protection. It was you, it was me. We needed your prints so we could use them today to make the community center robbery look like your fault, to pressure you into cooperating. But I truly don't know where the evidence is. Elijah never told me anything. She rose from the chair and moved closer, kneeling down to my level. Her presence made my stomach tighten. Then you need to remember. You must think back to every conversation you had during his last days. Every odd comment, every unexpected gift, every place he asked you to go or stay away from because he told you something, left you something. Men like Elijah always leave clues to protect their wives. Outside, I heard Arthur shouting, still arguing with the detective. How much longer could he keep them occupied? What if I really don't know anything? What will happen then? She straightened up, looking down at me with a cold stare. Then you'll go to prison for robbery and identity fraud. We have your fingerprints on the donation box, several witnesses, and video footage showing you at the scene. They will sentence you to many years, years spent locked away, far from your children, slowly wasting away in a cell. You can't let that happen. It's already done unless you give me what I want. The front door burst open. Arthur rushed into the house, closely followed by Detective Carter and another officer. Arthur saw me lying on the floor. He noticed the woman standing over me and his face paled. Get away from her, Arthur ordered, his voice filled with a command I had never heard from him before. The woman turned to face them, showing no signs of shock or worry. Arthur Stone, it's been years. Are you still the loyal protector? I said, get away from her. Detective Carter looked back and forth between the woman and me, the strange resemblance catching his attention for the first time. What's going on here? Arthur moved swiftly, placing himself between the woman and me and helping me to my feet with his free hand. In his other hand, he held something that made my heart race, an old, worn yellow envelope. It's time you knew the truth, Arthur said directly to the woman. The whole truth. He handed me the envelope and I received it with trembling hands. On the front, written in Elijah's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "For open, only with Arthur." What is this? I asked. Your answer, Arthur said, and also your damnation, depending on how you choose to use it. The woman stepped toward us, but Detective Carter finally acted, blocking her path. Nobody moves until someone explains what's going on. Mrs. Vance, or whoever you are, stay where you are, he commanded. I looked at the envelope in my hands, feeling its weight as if it contained not only the entire life I believed I knew, but also all the lies that supported it. Elijah had known. He had known this would happen someday. And he had left me something, something so important that dangerous people would come searching for it 5 years later. Open it, Aller, Arthur urged. It's time you learned who your husband really was and who you are now, that he's no longer here to protect you. With trembling fingers, I started to open the envelope, knowing that what I would find inside could change everything forever. The envelope held a letter folded into 3 parts, written in Elijah's careful handwriting. Just seeing it made me feel as if he was right there with me, trying to explain something he never found the courage to say in life. My hands shook as I began to read, while everyone in the kitchen waited quietly. My dearest, if you are reading this, it means the danger I feared has finally come. It means I am no longer here to protect you, and that Arthur has kept his promise to watch over you when I couldn't. Please forgive me for the lies. Forgive me for building our life on secrets you should never have had to bear, but understand that every choice I made was to keep you safe, you and our children. I had to pause, tears blurring the words. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder, giving me the strength to go on. For 20 years, I worked as an accountant for reputable companies. But 8 years ago, one of my clients asked me to review some accounts for a construction company. What I discovered was far more serious than I'd imagined. It was a large-scale money laundering operation involving prominent politicians, federal judges, and influential business people. They were moving millions of dollars through fake projects, inflated contracts, and diverted public funds. My breath caught in my throat. Elijah had uncovered a deep network of corruption. Why had he never told me before? At first, I tried to ignore it, wishing I hadn't seen anything at all, but I couldn't. I couldn't sleep knowing that those people were stealing money that should have gone to hospitals, schools, and social programs, funds that could have saved lives. So I began making copies, documents, transfer records, emails, anything that proved their guilt. The woman with my face let out a bitter laugh from behind the barriers where the detective kept her guarded. Your noble husband, so brave, yet so foolish. Arthur shot her a fierce glare, but said nothing. I kept on reading. I had reached out to a journalist named Marcus Reed. Our plan was to reveal all the information to the public, but someone discovered us. Marcus died in a supposed car accident 2 weeks before we planned to publish. That was the moment I realized they would come for me as well. I decided to take precautions. I hid all the evidence in a safe place. Only you could find it because it's connected to a memory only we share. My heart was pounding. What memory? What was he talking about? Was it our 25th anniversary? The trip we took? The spot where we renewed our vows? The small box we buried under the tree with our written promises inside? Everything is there, my love. Every document, every piece of proof, every name waiting for someone brave enough to use them. The letter went on, but my hands trembled so much that Arthur had to hold the paper so I could keep reading. Arthur knows everything. He was my confidant and protector. I asked him to keep an eye on you from afar, never revealing anything unless there was an immediate danger. Trust him just as I trusted him. And forgive me, Ara. Forgive me for leaving you alone with this heavy burden. If you're reading this, it means you face a choice now. You can hand over the evidence and finish what I began, even if it means risking your safety. Or you can destroy it and spend the rest of your life in peace. Although that peace will be silent, I won't judge whichever path you choose. Just remember, I love you. I always loved you. And my greatest regret is not being there to face this journey with you. Always yours, Elijah. I let the letter fall from my hands, feeling as if my heart had been torn from my chest. All this time, for 5 years, I believed I truly knew my husband. But in fact, I had been living alongside a stranger, someone brave and foolish, who had chosen to face powerful people without even telling me. Our 25th anniversary, I whispered. We traveled to the cabin in the mountains 2 hours from here. Arthur nodded softly. The cabin you rented for a week, where you renewed your vows beneath that old oak tree. The memories came back with clear but painful sharpness. It was one of the most beautiful moments of our marriage. Elijah had planned everything: the small, cozy cabin, the private ceremony with just the two of us, and the tree beneath which we promised to love each other for another 25 years. We had written our vows on pieces of paper and buried them in a small metal box at the base of the tree, agreeing that we would return someday to find them. But we never went back. 2 years later, Elijah was gone. The documents are here, I said quietly, more to myself than to the others, hidden under the tree. The woman who looked like me stepped forward, but Detective Carter stopped her firmly. Who are you? He asked her, and don't try to deceive me, because I've had enough of this whole circus. She looked at him with disdain. I am someone hired to recover something that doesn't belong to this family, something Mr. Vance took from very important people. He didn't steal anything, I quickly responded, finding my voice. He recorded crimes. There's a difference that cost him his life, she said coldly, and it could cost you yours if you're not careful. Arthur stepped between us, his body tense like a spring. You're not going to touch her. Elijah made me promise, and I intend to keep my word until my last breath. Detective Carter rubbed his face with his hand, clearly trying to process everything he'd heard. This is completely outside my jurisdiction. We are dealing with a conspiracy, political corruption, and the possibility of murder. I need to contact my superiors. No, Arthur said urgently. You don't know who you can trust. If those people have the power Elijah documented, then they have connections everywhere. Police, judges, prosecutors. One wrong call, and I could be dead before morning. The words hit me like a bucket of cold water. Dead. Was I really in that much danger? So what do you suggest I do? The detective asked, and for the first time, I detected uncertainty in his voice. Let's go, Arthur replied. Let's get to that cabin, retrieve the documents, and then hand them over to the proper authorities, someone outside the local system, perhaps federal. The woman laughed. Do you really believe they'll make it to that cabin? My employers have eyes everywhere. Before they even reach the city limits, people will already be waiting for them. Then we'll die trying, Arthur said with a firmness that frightened me. But we are not giving those documents to you to destroy. Detective Carter looked at Arthur and me, then at the woman, caught between his sense of duty and what was right. If I let you go, I'm risking my career, possibly my life. And if you don't, I replied, finally feeling resolute, you'll be letting corrupt people continue stealing and killing without facing consequences. My husband died trying to do the right thing. I won't let his sacrifice be in vain. Outside, a long silence settled. Another officer knocked on the door, asking if everything was okay. Detective Carter ignored the call, clearly deep in thought. After a moment, he let out a heavy sigh. You have 2 hours head start. After that, I will have to report this, and may God help us all. Arthur quickly grabbed my arm and pulled me out through the back door, while Detective Carter stayed behind, standing in front of the woman to block her path. I could hear her shouting and threatening, but her words grew faint as we rushed through the side yard toward Arthur's car parked on the street. Get in quickly, he commanded, opening the passenger door. I hurriedly climbed inside and he started the engine before I even finished shutting the door. The tires screeched loudly against the pavement as he sped down the quiet street. My heart was pounding so fiercely I felt it might leap out of my chest. Looking in the side mirror, I saw Detective Carter coming out of my house, speaking urgently on his radio. The woman who looked like me, Yvette, appeared behind him, her face full of rage. Do you really think we'll make it to that cabin? I asked, my voice trembling. She said they have people everywhere. We have to try, Arthur answered calmly, his eyes focused on the road as he took a turn way too fast. Elijah didn't die, so these documents could stay hidden forever. We left the neighborhood behind and joined the main road. Arthur drove unpredictably, constantly switching lanes and taking unexpected exits to make sure no one was following us. How did you truly know Elijah? I asked, wanting to understand. You said he told you everything. Why did he trust you? Arthur kept his focus on the road, but I saw his jaw tighten. Because I also worked in secret. 15 years ago, I was a private investigator. I specialized in uncovering corporate fraud. Elijah hired me when he began to suspect something was wrong with his clients. What we discovered together was far worse than either of us had expected. Why didn't you ever tell me? All these years, living just 3 houses away, helping me in the garden, sharing coffee on skill. It was all a lie. It wasn't a lie, he said firmly. My care for you is genuine, Aura, but I had orders from Elijah. I was only supposed to reveal the truth if your life was in immediate danger. And until today, it wasn't. How did you know today was the day? Because I've been noticing strange movements for months. Unfamiliar cars in the neighborhood, people watching your house. Someone checked your trash last week. I sensed they were preparing for something. When I overheard a conversation early this morning, I realized it was today. That's why I came to warn you. He took a different exit off the highway onto a quieter secondary road. The city's scenery gradually faded into rolling hills and trees. The cabin was nestled in the mountains, far from the city, in a secluded spot Elijah had chosen specifically for its privacy. How much longer? I asked. About an hour and a half if we aren't stopped. But we can't go the direct way. I'll go round, use back roads. It will take more time, but it's safer. I looked in the rearview mirror. For now, the road behind us was clear, but I knew that wouldn't last. That woman, whoever she was, wouldn't give up so easily. Who is she? I asked. How is it possible that she bears such a striking resemblance to me? Arthur shifted gears as we drove up a steep hill. Her name is Yvette. She is a specialist. These criminal groups employ people like her to infiltrate and replace identities. They have perfected their methods with prosthetic makeup, minor surgeries, and voice training. She's likely been studying you for months. Every gesture, every expression, every movement. The thought made my stomach churn. Someone has been watching me, analyzing my behaviors, preparing to take my place. And Detective Carter, do you really think he'll give us 2 hours? I hope so. He seems sincere in a corrupt system, but we cannot trust anyone except ourselves. We kept silent as we continued driving for several minutes. The scenery became greener and more rugged. We passed small mountain towns where life seemed to move at a slower pace, where people didn't know anything about conspiracies, hidden documents, or women who steal identities. Did you ever regret it? I suddenly asked, helping Elijah? If you hadn't, maybe he'd still be alive. Arthur held the steering wheel firmly. Every day. But I also understand that Elijah would have done the same with or without my help. He was a man of principles. He couldn't stand by while he saw so much corruption, and he left me with this burden. He gave you the truth and the choice of what to do with it. We arrived in a small mountain town, and Arthur pulled into a gas station. We needed fuel, and it was also a good chance to see if anyone was following us. Stay in the car, he said. Keep your head down. As he filled the tank, I looked around nervously. A few people were near, an old trucker drinking coffee, and a family with children buying snacks. Everything seemed normal, too normal. Arthur paid quickly and went back to the car, but before starting the engine, he checked his phone and his face went pale. What's wrong? He showed me the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message included only one photograph of our mountain cabin, and beneath it was a short note. We're waiting for you. My blood ran cold. They already knew where we were headed. How could that be? Arthur explained. They must have tracked my phone. And he immediately turned it off, removing the battery. Or maybe yours. Give me your phone. I handed him my device and he did the same, tearing out the batteries and tossing both phones into a nearby trash can. Without phones, we can't call for help if something goes wrong, I said. But at least they can't track us now. It's a necessary trade. He restarted the car, but his face was now shadowed with concern. If they're already at the cabin, what are our options? We can't just arrive there unannounced. Arthur drove in silence for a moment, lost in thought. Then he turned onto a narrow dirt track that led deep into the woods. I know another route to get there, a trail hunters used many years ago. It will lead us to the backside of the property. We can approach quietly and unseen, and if that plan doesn't work, we will adapt on the spot. But we won't give up, Era. Not after all we've been through. The dirt road was rough and full of potholes. Arthur's car groaned with each bump, but he kept going, driving deeper into the forest. The sunlight barely made it through the thick tops of the trees, casting long dark shadows. I asked, when was the last time you came through here? I held onto the seat as the vehicle jolted over a rock. Years ago, I used to hunt with my father in these woods. I hope the trail remains passable. It didn't look very easy, but Arthur refused to stop. After 20 painful minutes, we finally arrived at a small clearing. He parked behind some thick bushes to hide the car as best as he could. From here, we will go on foot. It's about a 20-minute walk to the cabin. We stepped out of the car, and the quiet of the woods wrapped around us. The only sounds were the breeze rustling through the leaves and the faint chirping of distant birds. Arthur opened the trunk and took out a small backpack that held flashlights, water, and something that made my heart stop. A gun. Do you really think that will be needed? I asked, pointing at the pistol he was fastening to his belt. I hope not, but Elijah made me promise to protect you no matter what, and I intend to keep that promise. We began walking along a faint trail winding between the trees. Each step carried me further from the life I knew and closer to an uncertain future. I kept Elijah's letter, carefully folded in my pocket. His words echoed in my mind. You have a decision to make. But did I truly have a choice? After everything that had occurred, after learning that my husband had been killed, after spending 5 years unaware, could I simply turn away? No, not anymore. Elijah had begun this, but I was determined to finish it. There it is, Arthur whispered, pointing through the trees. I can see the cabin in the distance, and just as the message warned, 2 SUVs are parked outside. We're not alone. We crouched behind a fallen log, quietly watching the cabin from our hidden spot. The two parked cars were black SUVs with dark tinted windows. I couldn't tell how many people were inside, but I knew they weren't expecting visitors. The tree is on the other side, I whispered to Arthur, near the small stream behind the cabin. He studied the terrain, assessing the distances and angles. If we move to the left, following the line of trees, we can reach the cabin without them seeing us through the windows. But we must remain silent. One noise and they'll be aware of our presence. They already know we're here, Arthur. It's a risk we have to accept. Slowly, we began to move, crouching low and using the trees and bushes as cover. Every branch that cracked beneath our feet made me hold my breath. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it from the cabin. It took almost 10 minutes to walk what would normally have been a 2-minute journey. But at last, we reached the back of the property, and there it was, the old oak tree where Elijah and I had renewed our vows 25 years ago. It looked older now, more twisted, but still magnificent. Its roots stretched across the ground like ancient veins. Somewhere beneath those roots was the box we had buried, a box that now held much more than our promises of love. Do you remember exactly where you buried it? Arthur asked in a barely audible voice. I closed my eyes, trying to recall. We had stood in front of the tree, Elijah digging with a small spade. I held the metal box. He had chosen a spot between two large roots on the side facing the stream. There, I pointed between those two roots. Arthur took out a small folding shovel from his backpack and began to dig very carefully, trying not to make any noise. The soil was tougher and more packed than we had expected. Years of rain and roots had pressed the earth tightly together, almost like a sealed tomb. Every time the shovel moved, my nerves grew more tense. How much longer before someone came out of the cabin? Or before they found us? After what felt like a long pause, Arthur's shovel suddenly struck something hard and metal. We both froze, listening closely to see if anyone had heard the sound. But there was only the gentle whisper of the wind and the distant murmur of the stream. Arthur used his hands to clear away the dirt, slowly uncovering a rusty metal box. It was bigger than I remembered. Elijah had replaced our small promise box with something much sturdier. Carefully, he pulled it from the hole. The box was secured with a combination lock. Arthur looked at me and asked, "Do you have any idea what the code might be?" I thought quickly. Elijah always used meaningful dates for his passwords and combinations. Our wedding anniversary, the children's birthdays. But this was different. It was something only I should access. That's when I remembered the date of our 25th anniversary, the day we buried the original box. I turned the dial with shaky fingers. The lock clicked open. Inside were documents, many papers in folders, USB drives, external hard drives. Elijah had carefully recorded everything: names, dates, amounts, bank transfers. It was like a detailed encyclopedia of corruption. "My God," Arthur whispered, hurriedly flipping through some papers. "This is bigger than we imagined. There are national-level politicians here, high-ranking federal judges, and businessmen who control entire industries." "How much money?" I asked. "Hundreds of millions, maybe more, decades of systematic theft from public funds." Suddenly we heard voices. They were emerging from the cabin. Arthur quickly closed the box and slipped it into his backpack. "We need to leave now." We began moving backward towards the trees, but just then the back door of the cabin opened. Two men stepped out, both carrying weapons, and started scanning the area. "Don't move," Arthur whispered. "If we do, they'll spot us." We froze behind a thick bush, barely breathing. One of the men was walking straight toward us, about 15 feet away. Arthur placed his hand on the gun at his waist. I closed my eyes and silently prayed. The man stopped just 15 feet from our hiding spot. He took out a cigarette and lit it, looking into the woods. For a moment that felt like eternity, I thought he had seen us. But then his radio crackled. "Anything back there?" asked a woman's voice over the radio. The voice of a vet, the one with my face. "Nothing, just trees. Maybe they're not coming after us after all." "They will come. They have no other choice. Stay alert." The man took another drag from his cigarette, then flicked the butt away and headed back toward the cabin. Arthur and I waited another half minute before daring to move. Go, Arthur whispered softly and slowly. We began to step back, gradually putting distance between us and the cabin, but I sensed this wasn't the end. They would be in control of all the exit routes. They would be waiting for us. Arthur, I whispered once we were far enough away, we can't just leave. They're going to follow us. They'll pursue until they get those documents. I know, he replied. That's why we're not going to run. His eyes held a strong resolve that frightened me. We're going to resolve this right here, right now. Elijah had contacts, trusted people. Before I discarded the phones, I sent a message to one of them, a federal prosecutor. Elijah knew him, someone outside the corrupt local system. I shared these coordinates with him. He should be arriving with backup in less than 30 minutes. Less than 30 minutes, Arthur. We cannot stand for 30 minutes against armed people. We do not need to endure that long. We just need to stay hidden. We went back to the car, but instead of driving away, Arthur started gathering more items from the trunk. Flares, a rope, a hunting knife. What are you doing? Getting ready. If they find us before the authorities arrive, I need to make sure these documents don't fall into the wrong hands. He opened the box again and took out one of the USB drives. He handed it to me. Hold on to this. If something happens to me, if we get separated, you must give this to the authorities. Do you understand? No matter what happens, this drive must reach safety. I grasped the small USB drive, feeling its weight despite how tiny it was. Inside this small object was Elijah's life and death, his legacy, his truth. Arthur, I am scared. He placed his hands gently on my shoulders and looked straight into my eyes. Ara, your husband made me promise to take care of you, but now I realize that I don't need someone to care for me. You are stronger than you believe. Elijah understood that. That's why he left this in your hands, because he knew you would have the courage to do what is right when the moment arrived. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I wiped them away with resolve. He was right. I was no longer the frightened widow hiding away at home. I was no longer the woman wandering in ignorance. Now I knew the truth, and the truth called for action. What do you need me to do? I need you to stay here, hidden. If you hear gunfire or if anything goes wrong, get in that car and drive to the nearest town. Look for the federal police, not the local officers. Hand them the drive and tell them everything. Promise me. I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to protest, wanted to beg him not to leave me alone. And what about you? Arthur smiled, but not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile of a man who has come to accept his destiny. I'm determined that Elijah did not die in vain. I am committed to keeping the final promise I made to my friend. Before I could respond, we heard the roar of engines. The black SUVs were pulling away from the cabin, beginning to patrol the area. They had found us, or at least they knew we were close by. Arthur gently pushed me toward the car. Hide and stay hidden no matter what happens until it's safe. Arthur, no. But he had already moved away, slipping into the woods with the backpack containing the box of documents, drawing their attention away from me, becoming the decoy. I was left alone in the car, clutching the USB drive tightly in my hand, listening as the engines grew nearer. The minutes that followed felt like the longest of my life. Hiding inside the car, crouched on the back seat, I listened to the sound of the SUVs moving through the woods, the shouting of commands, the hurried footsteps among the trees, and then the sound I dreaded most. Gunshots rang out, 3 quick shots, then silence. Shortly after, I heard voices and movement nearby. I pressed the USB drive close to my chest, praying that Arthur was safe, even though deep down I knew he had done what he promised, sacrificed himself to protect me. Silent tears ran down my face. Elijah had died for this truth, and now Arthur was gone too. How many more lives would this cost? When would this cycle of violence and secrets finally end? Then I noticed something different. Sirens. Many sirens, and the unmistakable whine of approaching helicopters. Arthur's backup had arrived. What followed was total chaos. More gunfire, shouting, orders shouted through loudspeakers, demanding everyone put their weapons down. I kept hidden, trembling, too afraid to move a muscle until everything suddenly became quiet. At last, someone knocked on the car window. It was a man wearing a ballistic vest marked with large letters, FBI. Behind him, dozens of federal agents moved through the area, arresting the people who had been hunting us. Mrs. Vance, I am Special Agent Davis. Arthur Stone contacted us. He is safe, though injured, but he will recover. The wave of relief that swept over me was so strong I almost fainted. I stepped out of the car with shaky legs, and the agent gently held my arm. Do you have the documents? I showed him the USB drive. He took it carefully, as if it were the most valuable thing in the world, and maybe it was. This will change many things, ma'am. Some very powerful people are going to fall because of what your husband documented. They took me to where Arthur was being cared for by paramedics. He had a bullet wound in his shoulder, but he was alert and smiling when he saw me. We did it, he said faintly. Elijah would be proud. I knelt beside him, taking his hand. You're a fool. You could have died. But I didn't. And now the truth will come out. I saw Yvette being handcuffed and loaded into one of the federal vehicles. As she passed by, our eyes met. There was no longer any resemblance between us. She was simply another criminal being taken into custody. The days that came after were a whirlwind. Elijah's documents sparked the biggest corruption scandal in many years. 14 high-ranking politicians were arrested, including 2 senators and a governor. Judges, business people, government officials, all of them fell like dominoes. The money laundering operation had moved over $300 million over 2 decades. Elijah's name was cleared. The media called him a hero, a brave accountant who dared to challenge the corrupt system. His death was officially declared a homicide, and new investigations were launched. Arthur recovered from his injury and was recognized for his courage. Detective Carter, who had given us those vital 2 hours, was promoted and put in charge of a new anti-corruption task force. But for me, none of that mattered as much as the truth. I finally understood who my husband truly was. Not the quiet man who read the newspaper every morning, but the silent hero who risked everything to do what was right. 3 months later, I returned to the cabin. This time, it was a bright, peaceful day, and I was alone. I walked to the old oak tree and sat in its shade, touching the ground where we had buried our promises so many years before. I took out a new letter I had written, carefully folded. In it, I shared with Elijah everything that had happened, how I had found my courage, how I had completed his mission. I told him I forgave him for keeping secrets, that I understood his reasons, and I promised to live the rest of my life honoring his memory. I would do so not by hiding from the world, but by facing it with the same bravery he had shown. Then I dug a small hole and buried the letter beneath the tree, along with the ashes of the fear I had carried for so many years. When I stood up to leave, I felt different. I was no longer the fragile, frightened widow awakened by desperate knocking at her door. I was a woman who had faced danger, uncovered terrible truths, and risked her life in pursuit of justice. I was a woman who now understood that the truth, no matter how difficult, is always worth seeking, because in the end, the truth is the only thing that truly frees us. I drove home as the sun set behind the mountains, filling the sky with shades of orange and pink. Shayla and Jackson were coming to visit that weekend. We had many things to discuss, many wounds to heal, but now we could do so with honesty, without secrets dividing us. My house no longer felt like a prison. It became a home, a place where I had loved, lost, and found my own strength. Each night, before going to sleep, I looked at Elijah's photograph on my nightstand and whispered the same words to him. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for believing I would be strong enough. And thank you for loving me enough to protect me even after your death. Because in the end, that was what it all came down to. A final act of love from a man who knew his wife had the courage inside her to change the world. If only she had been given the chance to realize it, and I had found it, the truth had come to light. Justice had been served. And I learned that it is never too late to become the hero of your own story. That morning, when Arthur knocked on my door at 6 o'clock with his urgent warning, I was just a frightened woman. But by the end of the day, I had become something much greater. I had become someone who refused to live in ignorance, who chose honesty over comfort, who risked everything to do what was right. And I discovered that this was the most important lesson Elijah had wanted to teach me. Not that I should be kept safe from the world, but that I possessed the strength to face it. Now, every morning when I wake up, I look out my bedroom window and see a new day full of hope. I am no longer afraid of shadows or secrets because I have come to realize that the light always finds a way to shine through, no matter how much others try to hide it. That light now resides in me, guiding my steps and reminding me that I am stronger than I ever thought I could be. I am the keeper of Elijah's memory. I am a survivor. I am a fighter. I am Laura Vance, and my story is not over. It is only just beginning. Looking back now, I've realized something very important. Throughout my life, I believed that staying safe meant keeping quiet and avoiding trouble. But the morning Arthur knocked on my door taught me otherwise. True safety comes from confronting the truth, even when it feels frightening. My husband believed in justice, and for many years I thought his bravery was what made him remarkable. Now I see that what truly made him special was his unwavering faith in me. He understood that someday I would find the courage to stand up for what is right. If you ever feel afraid to face a challenge, remember this: bravery isn't the lack of fear. It's the decision to move forward even when you're shaking with nervousness. That's what truly makes a difference in your life. If you agree with me and enjoyed my story, please show your support by liking this video. Let's see how many of us there are. I'd love to know, what city are you watching from and what time is it there? Share your answer in the comments. If you'd like to help support my work, you can send a small donation. Thank you for taking the time to listen and share a part of your day with me. For more stories like this, check out my other videos and subscribe to my channel. On the screen, you'll find 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Just click on one and start listening now.